what are you looking at for this game from Miami's perspective?
Yeah, so you come into this game knowing that FSU is going to get your best shot coming off of a loss versus Virginia in an upset fashion where Virginia storms the field. And FSU just gets up for 2 games, usually annually, and it's Florida and Miami. Everybody knows this. Miami is a huge rival for FSU, so you know that you're going to get FSU's biggest punch. But Miami coming off of a bye week, I think that there's a couple important stats to know here. Miami gives up the least quarterback pressures in all of the nation at only a 16% rate. Carson Beck typically has time to throw the ball if he is allowed time to throw the ball in this game. I think that Miami will be able to, at the very least, win by a touchdown, if not more. I think that this Miami team is just from top to bottom has the talent to be the significantly better team in this matchup. Carson Beck is back to looking like, because of that offensive line, because the fact that they can challenge you in those trenches, both offensively and defensively, has looked back to his 2023 form rather than his last year form. And that is a very scary quarterback surrounded by some of the best receivers in the nation, some of the best running backs in the nation. And that defensive line, including Ruben Bain, including Hakeem Mesidor, has been one of the best in all of college football. If they can get pressure and if they can avoid FSU's pressure, I think that Miami wins this one pretty convincingly.
Yeah, we talked a lot about the line of scrimmage, the offensive line and the defensive line for Miami being so dominant against Notre Dame, USF, some of the teams that they've played so far this year. It's going to be really, really important against Florida State because what are they averaging per game rushing? It's like 336 yards. Yeah, that is a number, no matter how you slice it, you know, with some of the like other lower level teams that they've played, is an impressive and gaudy number. Miami's going to have to make sure that they can rely on their offensive and defensive lines. Obviously, you mentioned that they're protecting Carson Beck really well. If they do that, and I think that they will, because they certainly have the matchup edge there. If they do that, they should be able to handle this game. The 4.5 line, the 4.5 points, I just totally think Miami's going to be able to cover that. I think Florida State's a really good team, but with the way that their defense has been playing this year, I think that they definitely should be able to cover that, win this game, control the line of scrimmage, and do exactly what we think this Miami team is capable of based off of what we've seen so far this year.
Yeah, I think that line comes from the perspective of FSU coming off that loss and just the buildup of what I was talking about, the fact that they need this win to essentially like stay in maybe not the ACC championship race, but just in general for team morale. You don't want to go 3-2 back-to-back losses, one on the road, one at home at Doak Campbell Stadium. I think that's where more of the line comes from. Also, like betting lines usually are like skewed a little bit to the home team, so it makes sense as well. And especially in a rivalry game, they're not going to like make the line super drastic, but if you put these two teams on paper, I think Miami is at least a touchdown better. So I think that this line is at least safe at 4.5. And as somebody who actively has a particular interest in Miami, I think that's a line where I think it's safe enough to play for the weekend. I think that Miami wins by touchdown because of everything that we've mentioned. Ruben Bain is legitimately a Heisman Trophy threat, at least from the defensive standpoint. One of the guys that'll probably finish in like the first or second, as in terms of like defensive candidates towards the end of the season. Ruben Bain is an absolute dog. He like not only creates pressure, but he's the leading tackler on the Miami defense, as well as one of the guys who consistently is just pressuring the quarterback every single snap. So truly one of the best players in all of college football, and that is on a Miami defense that has drastically improved from last year. So just holistically, when you look at Miami, I genuinely like what I see. And I also think that if you're Mario Cristobal going into this game, FSU comes out from the perspective of they just lost this game. It's a rivalry game. You're going to get their best shot. But then also, if from Miami's perspective, this is the game that probably sees you into the college football playoff. And I don't think you say that to your team, but that is like widely understood that this is the biggest game that they have left on their schedule. They don't play another ranked team. This is at Doak Campbell. This is at FSU, a rivalry game. I think that those Miami guys, especially coming off a bye week, will be just as up for it as the FSU will be.
You know, a lot of crazy stuff happened in the ACC last week, so it's tough to project completely, and I'm looking at it from Florida State's perspective, on whether or not this, in turn, if it, places Miami in the college football playoff or really, helps them for the rest of the year, whether or not this eliminates Florida State from the college football playoff just simply because they won't be able to make it to the ACC championship game with 2 conference losses now. I would say that this, and so that's where I can kind of like see where you're coming from as far as they definitely it makes sense with this line. They should be awake and ready for this game because they could end up seeing their 3-0 season turn into 3-2, and then at that point it feels like the world is falling apart a little bit. But yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned Ruben Bain, 22 tackles for the season. This could be potentially a Heisman-esque game moment for him if he really goes off, has a couple sacks, does what he can do against this Florida State team. And he's certainly building a case for himself also to be at the top of next year's NFL draft. And I think that that's really good for him. He's obviously coming, having a bounce back year from last year after getting hurt in the first game. So that this is really good for him. And yeah, I just think Florida State, you could have this is potentially, it's really big for Miami because you could just put away a team that, in my opinion, is probably more talented than some of the other teams that have less ACC losses. And eliminating them like that would be really clutch. Now, I do also want to recognize that if Florida State does win this game, now Miami has a bit of an uphill battle to try to make their resume look even better. They're not in a place where they would be eliminated from the ACC championship game or anything like that, but it's one of those things to watch where Florida State now would have a bit of an edge going forward, but it's just something. I think it's something to watch. It's interesting. I do want to also recognize the other point as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, from an FSU perspective, this would be the game that you circle on your schedule for the rest of the season and look to and are like, wow, this game could genuinely be the point in the season that it's not a turning point, because before this they had before Virginia, at least they had a perfect season. They beat Alabama by double digits. They wrecked all the FCS schools that they played, but now that the Virginia game did happen, this is the game that you look at and you circle in and you're like, wow, this can be the point where we can possibly mark our name in the ACC championship, because we have the tiebreaker over Miami. If we don't lose another ACC game, they're pretty much in the ACC championship and then possibly on to college football playoff. I know that's looking very far ahead, but this is equally as big for each of these teams. So I do want to acknowledge the perspective from an FSU fan, how big this game is and why this team could be a legitimate threat to Miami here. I don't completely see it in that. I think probably for both of these teams, it's better that the ACC is maybe not as weak as possible, because then it diminishes your schedule, especially when you're looking at how you're going to rank these teams. But that Georgia Tech game versus Wake Forest, I think that probably a loss there probably benefits both teams, because Georgia Tech is probably the next favorite to make the ACC championship at this point, and them facing a loss against Wake Forest last week, pretty unexpected. What would have been an unexpected loss would have been probably good for both these teams, and everybody would at the top would have just been kind of even. Those top three teams would have been even at one loss if Miami loses this weekend, but Georgia Tech is undefeated, so it is an uphill battle for either of these teams if they are going to make the ACC championship game with another loss in their schedule.